Hello and welcome to Elvenhome, and to this edition which concentrates on two things: the completion of the work on painting all the figures and getting back to completing the work of building the engine shed. So let's get straight on by having a look at the completed painted figures. Here we are with the figures finished. I managed in the end to paint 38 figures. The kit I think was 60 originally, and I had painted some of these figures which went into High Elven Station, but not that many. I didn't paint all. Some of the ones just were not right. Some of them were very German because it's a Preiser kit. I mean, they were in lederhosen, which I don't quite think would have worked in post-war UK. I don't think lederhosen-clad individuals were common in the late 1940s. So, but I'm really pleased with what I've got out so far. I'm pleased with the range of colours, and you'll see in front of you all the colours that I used to produce the effect below. In the description, I have put a complete list of all the colours that I've used. And I was asked, I think by David Auger, but if it wasn't David, I do apologise. If it was, then this is for you. To say how where I got the colours from. They're all Vallejo Model Color, which I've gone over to almost exclusively using. I've found a lot of the Humbrol stuff a bit lumpy, and also I really rather like these eyedropper bottles instead of the tins or the plastic bottles that Humbrol come in. I've been acquiring various colours to do specific projects, but about 3 or 4 months ago I acquired 2 of their kits. One was Equestrian Colors, which is the Vallejo code VAL 70144, and as you might expect, that has lots of browns and dark reds in there. And a little bit later I saw one that was called Steam Era, and I thought, oh good, I'll go and get that, without seeing the bit that says in front Naval Steam Era. But actually that's really good for tones of blue and grey, as you might expect for battleships, and some greens as well, which are rather good. So that's given me quite a good combination. I've shown before, I think, I'll take a still of the paint holder that I bought through Amazon, which is made by Vallejo, in which all these are stored. I've got about 60 colours, I think, in all fairly similar tones, and I keep an eye open from time to time to see if there's any of the sets that I think would really help. But you'll not be surprised that with the sets there's quite a lot of overlap. So I do have, what have I got, 2, 4, 6, 7 colours I think that are duplicated at the moment. But they are very well used colours, so I'm not too worried about that. We'll get them on the layout at some point and see if you can spot them. It'll be fun putting these on the layout because there's a nice mix there. I think many of them probably I will put around the entrance to the station to try and give that some life. And some of these probably along Bagshot Terrace, I think, but we'll see. So I'll come back a bit later when you can see these on the layout. Time to turn my mind back to the engine shed. 2 videos ago now, I think I showed you where I'd got to with the engine shed, in that I had completed the wiring of the lights, and I had, I think at that stage, completed putting the front of the engine shed on, and indeed it's been sat on the layout now for 3 or 4 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, just so that I could be absolutely sure I liked the look of it because I don't want to go on and do the roof if I don't like the look of the front. Fortunately I do like the look of the front, so that's okay. The next part then is to start work on actually building the roof. And I think I'd shown you in the last time that I looked at the video that I'd started work on creating these, which are the end pieces for the canopy, which runs to here. Now, at the back, what I've created is two of these back to back stuck together using the trusses as a template. And the first set I'd already cut. I'd cut one set of them, and then I cut a second one. But in between times, I had watched the most recent digital edition of BRM, British Railway Monthly, I think, in which Phil Parker used a tool that I'd not seen before called an Alpha plastic cutter, which is this thing. I'm not going to give you a demonstration because I'm still learning how to use it properly myself. But the operable bit is this bit at the end here. And I've found, I suspect it's the same for you, that using a scalpel or any kind of bladed knife to cut tends to give you a beveled edge because of the way that the blade itself is cut. Exacerbated by me being left-handed, so that you writers cut with the shape very often, whereas us lefties cut away. If you've ever seen me cut with a right-handed bread knife a loaf of bread, most of the loaf is at the thick end of the slice. So far, I'm really impressed with this cutter. Instead of cutting down with a knife, you cut a groove in it essentially, and then you snap the plastic. Now this is for sheet plastic, because of course I use for the strip styrene, I'm using my little razor saw, which gives me a nice clean cut. But you use this to groove about a third of the way through the thickness, and then bend and snap it off using the back of this blade. If I just get this out, using the back of this blade, you then clean up the joint, the snapped off area. And I've been really pleased. I cut those two, because those are single ones for a reason I'll explain, and that one, which is the other one at the back, which is double-sided, were all cut using this. And I was really pleased with the cleanliness of the cut, which needed very little dressing to make sure that it was square. And this is going to be particularly important, I think, when I turn to creating the roof sections, which, as you know, along the outside here, are going to be in sections. So I don't want the edges of the sheet plastic that I'll be using to be beveled, because otherwise it all won't butt up nicely. So very pleased with that. Thank you to Phil Parker for showing it in BRM News. And maybe once I'm feeling really competent in its use, I may actually give you a demonstration of using it and seeing what things it produces. However, back to the engine shed itself. So the next thing for me to do is to install these. The ones at the back are fairly straightforward. If I just move these and bring the engine shed into position a bit better, gently, you'll see that the engine shed, that there is the gap between the inner wall and the outer wall, which is exactly this width. How good. So those are fairly easy to put in. I'm not going to try and do this around the phone because I'll almost certainly snap something. But those do just slot in and sit down in the back. And of course they are entirely level once they're in with the main trusses. It's a harder thing to do at the front, and I can't really show you this too easily. At the front here, you may recall there is a beam that goes across, obviously to close this off. So that's sitting just underneath the edge of this front piece here. And so the problem for me was, well, how do I attach this into here? That goes at the end there. Let's get the right ones in the right place. And the answer is essentially to create underneath. This will the main beam that's sitting just under here is going to go along this edge, and this is just wide enough, handily, to take one of these, which has a strip attached to the back, and that will sit at the back. And then I can use that to make sure that I'm sitting this square with the beam, because all of these trusses are square to the bottom of the beam. So I also need to cut out a little bit, and it's the opposite way around for each, because you've got the metal bars, the brass bars going through, which is carrying all the wires, and there's a very thin piece of the inner wall there. So these sit in here and will sit, once I've got this underneath, make sure that that sits flush and level. It's pretty level, you can see that already, but it's just a slight wonkiness there, which this will correct. And similarly for the one on the other side, this is more pronounced, that dips down. You can see it's not as tight a fit there as well. So that does definitely need something underneath to help hold it, which it will have. So once I've got those on, I'm going to get all these stuck on, and then I can start showing you the first section of the roof that I'm going to be putting in. So I'll go away and do that and come back in just a bit. Well, here you can see the layout, and the figures have all been put on. It may seem as though you can't see them, but actually you can. They make more impression in real life than they do on the camera. Now what I'm going to do is I'll zoom in so you can get a slightly better idea about what's going on, but the quality of the image may degrade a little as I do so. So if I go in here, that's about as far as I can do, but you can start to see the figures around the station. There are more along here, which have gone onto the platform, but this really has swallowed. Let me come back out again. This really has swallowed the figures without much difficulty at all. What I'll do now is I'll put up some shots that I took trying to get a bit closer, but even getting closer, these are really small figures. But I can see, as I look at the layout, that there are it's added a tremendous amount to this side as you stand and look, that there are people waiting to get into the pub, for example, standing talking in the street, going into the station, or walking to or coming away from the station, and of course that the platform on this side has got substantially more people on it than it had before. So the effort of doing the painting is all worth it. It is something I have to sort of build myself up to, because it's a slow process. You've got to let each coat dry for each colour before you go back and try and put the next one on, and then that process at the end of just touching up the flesh tones before I finish off with the hair. That pretty much completes all of that. I just wanted to give you some idea that there was something going on, and there are people on here. Maybe at some point I'll be able to get a closer look at them for you in some way. I'll have to try and have a think about that. Let's go back now just to finish off with the roof before we bring this edition to a close. Okay, well, you can see that I've put on the canopy ends. They've all gone on fine, they're all square, except this one has developed a slight kink at the top. I'm not quite sure how it's managed to do that, it's rather annoying. I'll put that right when I put the top piece of the roof on, because it's going to extend beyond the edges, obviously, to give a slight overhang. And I'll put two pieces of plastic inside that will just straighten that up as it clips on, to give it some, to get it straight. The next thing now is to build the roof itself. And I'm going to, you may recall, I've got this section here, that looks bendy, but never mind, it's not. This section here is going to sit on there. There'll be another one on the inside. And then down below you can see the elements that will make up much bigger windows on the outside of each canopy. And I'm going to try and fit these so that the glass is as near as I can get it to be is centered in each of these gaps. Now each of these gaps is very similar, but it's not exactly the same. So I'm going to need to do a lot of fairly careful measuring, making each of these windows, but it should look good when it's done. I will just have a look, because as you can see, there's one apparently finished one there. It's close, but not absolutely brilliantly close. But it may be that that's better, so that the two are exactly the same rather than having slightly different widths between each of these panels. The roof on this side is going to be a lot simpler to build because this is the centre beam, and then there will be two lengths going across the edge and obviously some pieces at the end here, which will go, as I've said, just over the canopy ends, so that it gives a slight overhang. Not a very big one, but a slight overhang. So that's just a case of measuring all that up and putting it into place. So the next thing now is for me to get on and do that. So that's my work for the next fortnight. And my aim, by the time you come back in the next episode, is for the roof to have been built and to be in position. So that's where I'm going to be spending my time over the next few weeks. So with that, let's go on to the final section of this week's video. Well, you may have guessed, there is yet another addition to the layout. I've been waiting to get hold of a second Peppercorn A1 because I have Great Northern and I've been waiting to get hold of a copy of Great Central, which is the one that you've seen just go by. Let me come down a bit so you can still see it go by a bit more. And so Rails of Sheffield were doing it. It's a pre-owned one, but it's in lovely condition. So that has been acquired. So I've done quite well, I think, for creating my London North Eastern Railway shed, because you saw it in the last edition that I've got now, I think, 2 A1s, 2 A2s, 3 A3s and 2 A4s. With another A4 on the way, Union of South Africa. So it's coming along quite nicely. I think there's a J69, B1, B17. So it's coming along quite nicely, the LNER fleet. And with that pretty much brings this edition to an end. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you have. That's always very helpful. And if you haven't already subscribed, well, please do subscribe, because it'd be great fun to have you along as I continue and complete the building of this layout of Elvenhome. But until oh yes, if you've got any comments, please do let me have your comments. The comments are always extremely useful and I enjoy responding to them. So with that, until I speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.